Good morning. Welcome back to our Bible study in the Gospel of John, or otherwise known as the fourth Gospel. Here we are in John chapter 4. Yesterday we talked about the woman at Samaria. I want to come back now to that story and see if we can continue our way in this chapter to the end today. We'll see how far we get. Okay. So first things first here. I intentionally made a remark yesterday about a particular text. And I want to come back to this because I wanted to see how some of you would react internally to my remark. It has to do with the narrative portion of the story at the beginning of John 4, where Jesus stops by Jacob's well, and the writer says, Jacob's well was there. Jesus, tired as he was from the journey. And I made that remark to you that was rather flippant. Some people think this refers to Jesus' humanity, yada, yada. Now, I did that because I wanted you all to think that when you come to texts like this, that's the first thing you think about. Oh, look, Jesus was fully human. He was tired. He was tired like we're. Have you ever noticed that when people go look for humanity in Jesus, they look for weakness? Have you ever noticed that? Oh, look, Jesus got tired like humans get tired. Jesus got upset like humans get upset. And it's always the negative stuff they look for. Have you ever noticed that? You do it too. Here are the Gospels trying to give us a portrait of Ho Huios tu anthropou, the Son of Man, Bar Neshah, the true human, the second Adam, new humanity. And what's the first thing we do anthropologically when we come to texts like this? Tired as he was. Boom, he's human just like us. We fail to recognize what's happening here in the story. We really do. Because we go right to this kind of negative anthropological thing. And this is just a small thing we do with a text like this. When we come to John 11 and it says, Jesus was wept so hard the boogers, the snot was just coming out his nose. You know how you see people weep at funerals, man, and they just got those big bubbles of snot. I mean, that's how hard Jesus is weeping in chapter 11. And we go, oh, look how human Jesus is. People, you got to get something here. Jesus is human like you. The Logos became flesh. We already established that in chapter 1, verse 14. We get all that. We get that he comes into our brokenness. He experiences our brokenness. We get all that. We see all that. The writers of the New Testament affirm all that. We get all that. What we need to start doing is beginning to ask questions about what makes Jesus as anthropos, true human, okay, the aletheia, Thenos anthropos, the true human. What makes him that, and why, and how then can we draw from his strengths into our life, rather than us always trying to put our weaknesses on him to make him human? Do you see what I'm saying? Okay. So if you have any doubt that Jesus took a shit and wiped his ass and took a piss and played with his ding-dong and all those things, and I'm not saying as a mature adult, but I certainly think he got past a lot of those crazy teenage habits, perhaps, if they're there, you know. You have to let Jesus be Jesus. Don't turn him into yourself, you know. Just because you're depressed, don't make him depressed. Just because you're angry, don't make him angry. Don't take all your negative humanity and put it on him and go, see, now he's really human. He's just like me. No, if he was that way, he wouldn't be the true human. He would just be another broken human that really never can help us. Can't save the world. Can't do that. And then the woman at the well recognizes this. She gets this. First, you have 3 chapters leading up to this story. You have the witness of the Baptist. You have the confusion of the disciples. You have a sign done at Cana the disciples don't get. You have an event in the temple at the beginning of the ministry that nobody really gets. It says the writer has to make very clear twice after Jesus was raised from the dead, we got this. We didn't get it then. Then you got the story of this incredible theological thinker coming to Jesus, and he's clueless. He's in the dark, and he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand anything. And then you've got this interwoven discourse of Jesus, John the Baptist, and the fourth gospel, and all these voices are mingled together as a coordinate witness. And we got to the end of chapter 3, and we saw that the Father loves the Son, has placed everything in his hands. Whoever believes in the Son has eternal life, but whoever rejects the Son will not see life, for God's wrath remains on him. Now, bam, here's that wrath of God category we talked about previously, but I want to put it now into context with the next narrative, which is about the Samaritan woman. And remember, Samaritanism has a creed, and that creed has 4 parts. We believe in one God, Moses, Torah, and the day of vengeance and recompense. That's it. We believe in God, the leading mediator, leading figure, the book, and a day when, scores are going to get settled. Bam! That's Samaritanism. It's John the Baptist. It's the Essenes. It's a Second Temple apocalyptic. You certainly see it in some Pharisaic writings. W.D. Davies, I think, was the first to show that in the 50s and 60s. This day of wrath thing, everybody's buying into. And then the Samaritan woman comes in this narrative. And she's part of this community that has this as part of their creedal structure, man. Not just part of their apocalyptic literature ethos or some of their texts and documents, but I mean, it's what's believed. She is the first real witness in the gospel. I mean, you have in chapter 1, remember all that list, of who Jesus is. He's this Lamb of God. He's this Messiah. He's this Rabbi. He's this teacher. He's this Son of God, King of Israel. You have all of this. And then the chapter with Nicodemus, the great teacher, who was basically summarizing that all of that everybody got even up to that point with Nicodemus. And Nicodemus gets all that. You're a great teacher. We get all that. He doesn't get it, but this woman gets it. She will get it enough to go bear witness to what she has experienced. The townspeople come out, and Jesus is going to hang out with them for 2 days. And it says many believed. And we've seen that Samaritan Christianity, which we don't talk about, we talk about Jerusalem Christianity, Paul and Antioch. We don't really talk much about Samaritan Christianity. We don't talk about the influence or the impact of Samaritan Christian thinking on early Christian thought. Definitely the Gospel of John. We really don't talk about Samaritan Christianity as the fertile ground from which Jewish Gnosticism will first arise, and then Jewish Christian Gnosticism, and then eventually some full-blown forms of just Greek Gnosticism. We really don't pay much attention to the Samaritans, and as a result, we don't really understand how you have 2 major traditions battling in Israel in Jesus' day, a northern and a southern tradition, and then all the battles around whether the southern tradition and the temple is legitimate. You with me on this? That's the big question. Is this thing legitimate? Is the priesthood legitimate or illegitimate? Is the temple legitimate or sacrifice? Pop. There's all these debates about this mountain in Jerusalem and this temple. Now, Judaism has 3 pillars. Any good scholar is going to acknowledge this. Torah, temple, land. Those are the 3 pillars of Judaism. Torah, temple, and land. In Second Temple Judaism. Torah, temple, land. They may still be in other parts, but definitely Second Temple Judaism, the 3 pillars. Torah, temple, land. Torah, temple, land. You can remember that. In the prologue, the writer gives us a signal already that there's going to be something done in relation to Torah. But before that happens, we're going to see something done in relation to temple, John 2, and to the question of land, John 4. Those 2 are going to be dealt with first, because the rest of the gospel is going to focus on Jesus' confrontation over Torah and interpretation of Torah. because that's what was important to this community, as it is producing this text in, say, the 90s of the first century, and it's engaged with different types of Judaisms there in Ephesus. And there would be a plurality of Judaisms in Ephesus. Different synagogues would have different types of thinkers and figures. Some would, be more toward an Essene perspective, some toward a Samaritan, some toward say, a liberal Pharisaic, perhaps a conservative Pharisaic. You had different types. So this writer's not in reacting to Judaism as a thing. And that's how come the New Testament is not anti-Judaic or anti-Semitic, and this is where your Jonathan Weltons and all your... Come on, people, get out of that stuff. Get away from that nonsense. They're very supersessionistic and anti-Judaic, and as a result, they're anti-Semitic, except they got that weird, sick Zionist thing going on in their head, too. Get rid of all that nonsense. Read good Second Temple literature. Pay attention to... scholars, real scholars, not the fools out there that are trying to teach you, Here you have a woman. I want to come back to this. Remember, at the end of John's Gospel, it's going to be a woman, Mary of Magdala, who bears witness to the resurrected Jesus. Here it's the woman at Samaria who gets him correct. He's the Taheb. He's the prophet like Moses. He's the one that God has promised that would not this Davidic Messiah figure. We know Jesus rejects that in the synoptic tradition, and that I've of course written about that in the Jesus-driven life. No, she recognizes him with this category of Taheb, this prophet like Moses, this one who would speak God's word to the people. And she listens to him, and she hears God's word, and she goes back to her village. And notice this is a woman who's shamed at the well, right? She comes out at noon. She comes out in the heat of the day. I mean, she's had 5 husbands. The guy she's with now isn't her husband. I mean, if we look at the morality of the story, we're dealing with a woman who's shamed. And remember, ancient Semitic cultures are shame-honor cultures. They're not oriented toward guilt like ours is. They're shame-honor cultures. And this woman has no problem going back into town, knocking on doors. Hey, I met Taheb. I met him. And the townspeople, they come out. Now remember, I've talked about Dositheus. We've already had Dositheus. Okay, whether he's before or after Jesus, the point is there are these figures in Judaism, and people come out and see them. Just like when somebody says to you, hey, the greatest theologian is coming to town to speak. You need to come listen to her. And everybody goes out and listens. Billy Graham's coming, whatever, I don't care. Same thing happens here. These Samaritans come out, and they believe, and Jesus stays with them 2 days. And we're eventually going to have Samaritan Christianity. This is from the testimony of a woman who is the first, in this sense, believer who creates a community of believers. And then, of course, you have the narrative in chapter 12 of Mary, Eleazar, and Martha's sister wiping Jesus' feet with her hair. You have this beautiful story of Mary of Magdala in the garden in chapter 20, and implicitly, of course, the role of the bride in the wedding at Cana. This Johannine author, you could say, has a feminist perspective. That is, women obviously play a key role in this community. And again, when we think of the Apostle Paul, women played key roles in his community. Okay? So if you're a fundamentalist or a conservative and you're listening to these Bible studies and you've got an all-male leadership thing going on in your church traditions, you'd better think twice, because these folks didn't. The Apostolic Church had women apostles, they had women leadership, and you just better get over your hierarchical self, okay? Because that ain't the way the gospel works. So I'm just going to make that observation about this particular gospel and the importance of the witnesses being women. And again, remembering that the testimony of a woman is kind of a second-class testimony. It's not given the same authority as a man's testimony. So this makes her testimony all the more powerful because she's bearing witness to the truth, just as Mary of Magdala will do, just as Martha will do. Okay, so when we come to the Samaritan story, so Jesus does the whole thing with the woman at the well, and then we have this little interlude, and we're going to begin in verse 27. Then Jesus' disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. Now again, just as the woman was surprised that Jesus would speak to her, the disciples are floored that he's talking with a woman. But nobody dared ask, "What do you want?" or "Why are you talking with her?" You gotta love this. This is the kind of little aside that just absolutely makes me chuckle about the gospel tradition, okay? So you have the disciples returning, and they're absolutely floored at the behavior of the master. But they don't dare raise a question about it. It's like, then, leaving her water jar. What'd she come out to the well for, people? She came out to the well to draw water. Why does she leave the water jar in the text? It's, whether it's historical or not, it could be. I mean, she might have just set it there and ran because she was so excited. But the author's signaling to you that this water jar, which can only supply water that creates thirst again, or that one becomes thirsty from after having one's thirst quenched, is now left behind. And this woman is leaving with the water jar inside her that springs up to these wells of Hudor zone, living, running water, moving water. Then, leaving her water jar, now we also have reference to a water jar, don't we? In chapter 2, the 6 purification jars with water that were turned to wine, leaving these jars behind. The woman goes back to town and says to the people, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did." Now, remember, this is a village that thinks they know this woman, right? And everything she ever did. She says, "I met somebody who told me everything I ever did." She should be absolutely ashamed of this. And here she is using this, Jesus knows my story. Jesus knows my story. My whole story. You got to come see this guy. He knows my whole story. And he gave me Hudor zone. You got to come check this out. She says, "Could this be the anointed one? Could this be the one that we've all been waiting for?" Meanwhile, his disciples, back at the camp over by the well, the disciples had gone to the local Mickey D's there in Sychar and picked up a bunch of food, brought it back, and they said, "Rabbi, eat something." They can tell he's tired. As far as we know, he still hasn't gotten a drink yet. You know what I mean? And it's not like these guys offered to pop open a cold one for him. They just wanted him to eat. "Rabbi, eat something." And he said to them, "I have food that sustains me that you know nothing about." Now, again, here's the Johannine writer doing that double meaning thing. There's 2 types of food, and this whole 2 types of food theme is going to be brought back into play in chapter 6 with regard to the bread. Okay? Here he's saying, I have something to eat that sustains me, just like you think food sustains you. It gives you energy, it gives you life, it helps you live. It says, "I have food to eat you know nothing about." And his disciples said to each other, "Did somebody go to Wendy's and pick him up, quarter pounder, bring it back to him? I mean, Taco Bell, did somebody go? Did you see any rappers about?" "My food," said Jesus, "is to do the will of the one who sent me and to finish his work." This one sentence is going to tell you everything you need to know about chapter 5 breaking the law, the Sabbath, and the creation story. This sentence here, my food, that is, Jesus says, what energizes me, what sustains me, what nurtures me, is to do the will of the one who sent me. That's the Father. And to finish the Father's work. In other words, the Father's work isn't finished. He did it up to a point, and then he gave the last bit of work to Jesus to do. That's why I've been sent. The Father sent me to finish the work that he started. And when he breaks the Sabbath in the next chapter, or at least is interpreted as breaking a Sabbath regulation, he makes the claim, in a sense, this is what he's going to be saying. You guys think God made the world in 7 days and then sat down and rested. It's 6 days, sat down and rested, had a Sabbath, and everything's, all about Sabbath. That isn't what's happening, Jesus says. In fact, God hasn't stopped creating. My Father is a working man till today. He's working, and I'm working too. I'm a working man too. I'm working. Creation isn't finished. We're both creating. I'm creating with him. He's creating in me and through me, and we're creating together, and then this creation thing isn't done yet. And they're just looking at him going, what? What? Of course, we know when creation is finished in the fourth gospel, tetelestai, on the cross, it is finished. The true human has been created. He through whom all creation can be renewed is created on the cross. The resurrection is the invigorating, the enlivening of that life for all. And thus the sending of the Spirit. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. So, my food is to do the will of the one who sent me and to finish his work. Now remember, the woman's gone and she's run off to the village, right? And Jesus says to them, do you not say to yourselves, man, 4 months and then the harvest. We got 4 months. Okay, so we know the harvest is in August, so it's got to be July, June, May. So it's late April. Late April, we can go, wow, we've got 4 months till the harvest. We're good. We're good. We got things we can do. We can, kind of dilly-dally around while the crop grows. It's all good. Fine. We got 4 months. Jesus says, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest. Hi, Carol. Hi, Brian. Hey, everybody. Maria, Carol, Rob, all that joined. So here you have, possibly, think about this for a moment. We don't know what time of year this is, of course, but let's say it's spring. Jesus is just, he's done the whole Passover thing, there, and we don't know how much time it takes as he's moving through this narrative. So let's, perhaps say it's May, whatever. And he says, look at the fields. Well, the disciples are just they're looking out at the fields. And he says, they're ripe for harvest. And they got to be thinking to themselves, he really needs glasses now. But again, it's that double meaning thing that the Johannine writer does all the time. And he says, even now, the reaper draws his wages. That is, he is reaping. He's the reaper. Even as he harvests the crop for eternal life, so that the sower, who's the sower, and the reaper may be glad together. Well, whose work is he finishing? The Father's. Father's the sower, Jesus is the one coming in to reap, and he's also going to be inviting his disciples to see that the fields are ripe, and they can reap too, but again, that's going to be later. So the Samaritan woman goes into town. We have the establishment of a community of believers there in Jesus. They'll tell the woman. It's a very Christological statement, obviously. It's formulaic. It's certainly, whether the writer's mingling historical reminiscences with his own creative stuff. This is the way this writer writes. It's certainly the way the early church handled the Jesus tradition. They were constantly manipulating it. And that doesn't mean you can't get back to a historical Jesus, but you have to be a whole lot more savvy than a whole lot of people currently are to be able to do that. But at any rate, they said to the woman, we no longer believe just because of what you said. We've been with him for 2 days, and we've heard for ourselves. And we know that this man really is the Soter, the Savior of the world. Now, here's another title added. But it's nothing different, really, than that which is stated in John 3:16, for God came to sozo the world, to save the world. This one is the Savior. This one is the one that's going to heal, restore, redeem, transform. I mean, well, there's so many English words we can use, none of really which capture what is happening. And then after 2 days, he's come from Judea, headed through Samaria. He leaves for Galilee. The writer puts a little aside in because he says, now Jesus himself had pointed out that a prophet has no honor in his own country. That is, here's Jesus going back to home territory. He's already been there, and he's already said prophets have no honor in their own country. We've seen this in the gospel tradition in the early Nazareth narrative in Luke 4. So here's Jesus back in Galilee, and when he arrived in Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him. That'll work. Okay. They had seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the Passover feast. That's a reference back to the end of chapter 2. While he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many people saw the miraculous signs he was doing and believed in his name, but Jesus would, up. Okay. He was welcomed as a miracle worker. Oh, good. The miracle worker's here, everybody. Let's all go get our miracle. When he arrived in Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him. They had seen all that he'd done in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, for they had been there too. So then Jesus can do magic tricks. And then it says, once more, he visited Cana in Galilee. Perhaps to visit the bride and the bridegroom or whatever. Where he had turned the water into wine, the writer notes. And there was a certain royal official whose son lay sick at Capernaum. When this man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him. Is he in Cana? The text seems to imply that Jesus is in Cana. The royal official's son lays sick in Capernaum. This writer could easily be there in Cana. Begs him to come and heal his son, who was close to death. The kid isn't going to make it. This is it. So he comes to Jesus, begs him, heal my son. Now, the title of this man is interesting. The NIV translates it certain royal official. The Greek term basilikos is used of members of Herod's royal household. Okay, so we're dealing here with somebody that is part of Herod's household. Certainly also explains some of those early traditions about disciples and believers within Herod's household. And then later down the road, of course, Caesar's. But at any rate, here's this fellow comes to Jesus. He's a royal official. He has authority. He has title. He has wealth. He has everything. But he can't heal his son. And he's about to go into the deepest grief he could imagine. And he begs Jesus to heal his son. Unless you people see miraculous signs and wonders, Jesus told him, you will never believe. You need to think about this for a minute, because in this gospel, the signs are going to be witnesses. The miracles, but we'll call them signs. That's what the author calls them. They're going to be witnesses, like John the Baptist, like the woman at the well, like Mary of Magdala. Okay? Unless you people see miraculous signs and wonders, you will never believe. So if you were to go to the end of chapter 12, which is the end of what a lot of scholars recognize as kind of a first part of the gospel, the book of signs, you have this, even after Jesus had done all these miraculous signs in their presence, signs 1 through 6, from Cana to the raising of Lazarus, they still would not believe in him. This is a kind of a pre-echo of what's going to be happening here. Jesus is just simply acknowledging, you people see signs and wonders, you won't believe until you see him, and then when you see him, you don't believe. So the miracle thing puts Jesus in a double bind. People won't believe until they see a miracle, And then when they see one, they won't believe it's a miracle, or it validates it. So welcome to liberal Christianity or fundamentalism. Gotta see a miracle, gotta see a miracle. Well, that's not a miracle. That's not a miracle. Anyway, come down before my child dies. This is the nobleman's response to that. Unless you see miracle signs and wonders, you won't believe. That's the kind of person you are. This guy could say, could say a lot of things that I can't say here on Facebook and my public page. But you can think of them just like I did. This guy could have told Jesus, to shove off. And he keeps imploring. He only has one thing on his mind, and that's his son, and one thing on his heart, and that's his son. He wants his son to live. And he says, sir, come down before my child dies. And Jesus says, you may go. Your son will live. Now notice there's nothing, your faith has saved you, your son, your faith has saved, none of that. Just, you may go. It's done. Your son will live. And the man does the nobleman here, the basilicos, does the same thing the woman in the story in previous had done. It says, the man believed Jesus' word. Just like the woman believed Jesus' word. They took Jesus at his word. And when they took Jesus at his word, their life changed. The man took Jesus at his word and departed. While he was on the way, his servants met him with the news that his boy was living. When he inquired as to the time when his son got better, they said to him, the fever left him yesterday, 7th hour. Then the father realized. Remember, the disciples remember? Here, then the father realized. This was the exact time at which Jesus had said to him, your son will live. So he and all his household believed. Now you have other Galilean believers, don't you? And you have believers within the royal household right there. So you see, unlike the Synoptic Gospels, which lead you to think Jesus only had a ragtag band of Galilean peasants, it's kind of the implication that you get reading Dom Crossan's work and others' studies on the historical Jesus. Jesus just had these ragtag peasants and stuff. No. Jesus' ministry and the group around him was far, far, far more diverse and truly representative of his culture than we even begin to acknowledge. So let's try to be fair to the historical Jesus here and stop portraying him as Che Guevara in the first century, rather. Okay, now the writer says this was the second miraculous sign that Jesus performed, having come from Judea to Galilee. Second. Now, Bob Fortna, back in the 60s, 70s, and throughout his career, is the exponent, the major thinker in and around what's known as the signs source in the fourth gospel. And that is, this writer used a source that had, these signs delineated and built his gospel around that. I am not a fan of that theory. In the sense that reconstructing the source doesn't give me a different kind of Christianity. And that's what people are always doing when they go, we're going to reconstruct Q. And then from Q, we're going to extrapolate all this data about the type of Christianity that existed. And then we're going to note that there are editorial layers in Q, so we can trace, 3 different types of Christianity. One type of Christianity that develops over 3 different periods, and boom, and we got Q. It's made up out of thin air. That kind of thinking. It doesn't work. It's not going to work here either. But there's something else that's a bit of a puzzlement. You'll notice in John 2, you have the wedding at Cana. This is the first miraculous sign. Then, at the end of John 2, Jesus in Jerusalem does a whole bunch of miraculous signs. He's already acknowledged that. The writers already said he was in Jerusalem. He did all these miracles. And then you have, bang, this was the second Samia, the second sign. Please understand this. Not all miracles are signs. For this writer especially, those so-called miracles. Jesus did all kinds of, quote, miracles. But there were some that this writer said, as he's looking at these, that they all point to the cross. And he selects these. This was the first of Jesus' miracle signs. Jesus does many signs. This is the second sign. Okay? So there's an acknowledgement that there's far more signs done by Jesus. There's an acknowledgement that people that haven't seen signs want signs. And then there's an acknowledgement that people that have signs don't believe them. Signs are a problem. Okay? The wedding at Cana as a sign is a problem. The healing of the nobleman's son is a problem. The problem is that we want these signs in order to believe. And when we get them, we don't believe. But when we do believe, like the woman at the well, like the nobleman, then we find ourselves in a different world, where this writer would say we've gone from darkness to light. Now we're moving here. We've gone from Galilee, Judea, Samaria, Galilee. We're covering the whole land here, aren't we, in just a few chapters? And not just Galilee, like the synoptic tradition, but the whole lock, stock, and caboodle. Jesus is everywhere. Okay? But he keeps coming back to Jerusalem over and over in this narrative. Even though this will be the only trip into Samaria, it's a significant one as it is and how it functions there right at the beginning. So, what we'll do is we'll pick up John 5 next week. I'll wish you a good Holy Week. If you are part of my mentoring group, you might want to look at the Holy Week videos I've been putting up in there for you today and previously, tomorrow and Sunday as well. If you're in Love Heretic group, I'm doing the grandfather videos there. I do want to say that I do all of this for free. This is a gift to you. If you find this Bible study helpful, you're welcome to support me. You truly are. I don't say no to money. I don't beg for it. I'm not going to beg you for it because I know a lot of you are cheap. I know a lot of you are broke. Okay? I get that. I know a lot of you have been burned by the church when you gave money. I get all that. But if these lessons are valuable to you and you'd like to keep them online and help support me so that I have the time to do the research and study, great. You can do that by going to paypal.com and putting in my email address, michael1517@yahoo.com. michael1517@yahoo.com, PayPal. Make a donation. If you want to become a monthly member, I have a Patreon page. Go to Patreon, become a monthly member, set up your credit card account, $5 a month, $10 a month. Look, man, if you can afford an internet service, you can afford a computer, a phone, and all that goes with that. And this teaching, you can find this teaching for free on the internet, this kind of thing, this quality material. You find that out there? Well, and it's free, good for you. But if you'd like to keep this kind of material going, hey, help out. Cool. All right. Happy Easter. Happy Holy Week. Wish you all the best. Look forward to talking to you about the healing of the man at the pool next week. Cheers.